In the Second Age, year 248, the most villainous man to walk the plains was born. Born into humble conditions, Shirikar was raised by two farmers in the southeast of what is now the Crucian Republic. At the time, it was known as the Kingdom of Zeltaria. As a child, he was never much use to his parents, always running off to the fringes of the farm and playing in the woodlands. As he aged, he became increasingly fascinated with books and began to study the days of old, the times when men dwelt with gods. He learned of the great heroes of that time and of powerful magicians who seemed to walk amongst the gods as their equals, and was enamored by their existence. In his late teen years, it would be an argument with his parents about inheriting the family farm, sparked by his father falling ill, that led him to leave his home behind. Though he felt remorse for his actions later in life, he would never return to the modest farmstead. He headed northeast into the Caladian Empire to find work in the city. He worked as a librarian for nearly a dozen years, copying down notes from books about magic, mostly written secondhand, though a few original sources from the late First Age were held at the library, as many were likely lost to time or hidden away in some lonely village. One day, as if by peculiar fate, an equally peculiar man crossed his path. As Shirikar hunched over his desk, scribbling down notes, he looked up to see a tall man dressed in magenta robes with a tall collar and a metal rod in his hands, brass in appearance. With long, spindly gray hair and a clean-shaven face, the man smiled down at him. This man was Alabate, one of the two students taken in by the legendary Signal, Alamott's brightest pupil. Alabate was ready to take on his first student, having adequately studied the arcane arts for nearly 300 years, going so far as to distill down and refine the art of enchanting objects. He hadn't put much thought into how to select a student, and decided that the library would be best to find someone so suited to sitting behind books all day. And so it was that Shirikar eagerly fell under the tutelage of Alabate. And it was nearly another 200 years of studying the stars, researching ley lines, exploring his dreams, enchanting objects, and invoking the spirits of the natural world, as well as conjuring the powers within himself, before Shirikar was considered at the appropriate level of understanding by his teacher that he was allowed to walk away freely to take his own road down the arcane path. By now, Shirikar had realized the unique strife of wizard kind, that they were left behind by the world. While they sat behind their tomes and acquired knowledge, extending into unnaturally long life to hoard more and more secrets to themselves, the world beyond the walls of their towers and dungeons never stopped. Everyone he had ever met before studying magic had died of old age, and here he now stand in his 203rd year, only beginning his life anew. It was out of shame that he never returned home to see where his parents, nor the sister he never met or even knew of, were lying at rest. It was of no concern, for it had never occurred to him that he still had living relatives. Shirikar headed west into modern-day Bindale, in search of his own place to settle. Following a star map and tracing ley lines throughout the country, Shirikar was led to a uniquely large and perfectly circular grove within the forest that covered the majority of southern Bindale. He took mud from the ground and breathed life into it, creating golems for his personal use. An army was formed with the task of gathering resources in order to construct a grand tower taller than any other construct, taller than the Rimthan Mountains themselves, so that he may watch over the world beneath him. The golems worked ceaselessly, night and day, for over another 50 years before the project was completed. Tall it stood, and magnificent. Impossible to go unnoticed, the mighty tower drew the attention of the king, either Ramsar the Great or Ramsar the Second, depending on the source. Exact dates of the tower's construction and completion are still subject to debate by scholars, as examining the ruins is impossible. This meeting, however, would greatly impact the history of Porus. Shirikar became closely entangled with the politics of the time, eventually serving as advisor to the king of Lelfinger, modern-day Bindale, for 3 centuries, until the 825th year of the Second Age. However, there was a significant gap in his service to the kingdom of Lelfinger, between 640 and 697, when he sailed east to Feyfura to meet with Mesbel, one of the 4 daughters of Visma, mother of dreams, and another of Alamott's 3 disciples. It was under her guidance that Shirikar mastered, to an expert level, the arts of scrying and astral projection. Shirikar's studies of dreams in Feyfura led to an obsession within him, a craving which he could not ignore. He soon found his own magic to be inferior by comparison, and spent every free moment within the realm of dreams, reaching depths within that had only been touched before by the 3 disciples of Alamot. In one instance, after much careful preparation, he retreated into the world of dreams for an entire year. This year would be the most prominent turning point in history since the arrival of Alamot. For while the gods had been banished from the material world, they were never far away. They worked invisibly, and most notably resided within the realm of dreams itself, and time worked strangely there. Though a year had passed in the world of matter, within the world of dreams, thousands of untold years went by. With seemingly limitless time at his command, and a master over the art of dreams, Shirikar made the most excellent use of his time, gaining mastery over all 12 arcane schools, and amplifying his own inner power to levels that had been unseen by man since creation first began. But there was something wrong, something lurking in the shadows, unseen even all this time by the wizard. Pithme, firstborn of Inkna and the father of nightmares, had planted small seeds into Shirikar's mind, twisting and distorting his perception so slowly over centuries that it went unnoticed. Even by the time the endless, mystifying expanse of the dream realm had turned for Shirikar into a world of rot and darkness, he still remained unaware, like a frog slowly boiled alive. When Shirikar awoke, it was not the same man who had fallen asleep the year prior. Driven mad by Pithme, his first action upon waking was to slay the king of Lelfinger, King Osbin IX. Though strong as he may have been for a man of 65, neither him nor his guards stood a chance against Shirikar. Every troop garrisoned in the capital was of no utility against this new god amongst them, and all were likewise slain. After that, every remaining soul left in the city was taken, and the city was razed, given as offering to Pithme in exchange for such intoxicating power. And thus did Shirikar's conquest begin. The golems once responsible for building his high tower were reawakened from their cold slumber, brought back from the vast underground cavern which they dwelt. They rose with new purpose, to bring suffering into this world for the amusement of their lord. Shirikar and his golem army marched upon all of Lelfinger, across the entire western half of Porus. They toppled cities, dethroned local lords, and razed villages. For Shirikar, conquest was enough to bring satisfaction, to exert his power on those he deemed lesser. But for Pithme, watching on from deep below, he watched with the amusement one might have watching a stage performance. After Lelfinger fell, and nigh 2/3 of the entire continent of Porus lay at Shirikar's feet, the Black Wizard finally met resistance. At the borders of the Caladian Empire, rulers of the eastern shores, a grand wall of stone had been erected by beings of similar make to Shirikar's own golems, and upon the ramparts of these walls stood 10,000 men, clad with arms and armor enchanted by the high wizards of Caladia itself. For the first time in a decade, Shirikar faced defeat, and with his golems slain and enslaved armies on the retreat, the wizard too was forced back into the shadows. But the Caladian generals knew not to sit idly and celebrate their victory. They pushed forward, past their western wall, and made to free the territories lost to the Black Wizard. And as these were the days where man, elf, and ogre lived in peace, Caladia called upon the armies of Feyfura and Uhea to join them in this fight, lest they be next to fall should Caladia fail. And as the mighty armies of Caladia pushed through the war front with ferocity unmatched, wielding swords of flame and shields of crystal, the noble cavalry of the elves were not far behind, and so too followed the ogres with their unequivocally supreme brawn. The war raged on for 2 decades more, with the mortal armies being held in place at multiple intervals. Supply lines from across the ocean were slow and running thin, and Caladia had not the resources to supply the aiding forces for much longer. For the elves, a new problem began to stir. Shirikar, a master of dreams, was not only fighting in the physical world. Of all the mortal races, the elves were most connected with the realm of dreams, but this made them particularly vulnerable to Shirikar's psychic attacks. When the armies slept, Shirikar would attack them, giving no rest and driving many to madness. Not even the elves still in Feyfura were safe, for in their dreams physical distance mattered not. Shirikar could bombard the elvish nobles in their dreams every night without end. So too did he harass the civilian population. Morale amongst the elves had quickly diminished. Knowing their situation could not hold much longer, the alliance between the remainder of free men, elves, and ogres made for one final push. A blitz through the remaining territory still controlled by the Black Wizard to make for his tower with haste. They pushed through the narrow stretch of land, avoiding what settlements they could as to not be held up with fighting and lose men. For several days they marched as quickly as they could, hoping to reach Shirikar's tower before the enemy had noticed. Failure of this mission would surely lead to the fall of the Caladian Empire, and the lands of Feyfura and Uhea would be to follow. On the 112th day of the year 860 in the Second Age, the allied armies had arrived at Shirikar's Black Tower. It stood like a needle, reaching straight up into the heavens themselves. Standing at the top, one surely must be able to pluck the stars out of the sky. For a month without ceasing, this final battle raged. The grounds were scorched, and all life was sucked from the land. Casualties for the allied armies were great, nearly too much so. Many began to fear that this would truly be the end, that the mortal races should fall back into servitude as they did in the First Age. In the end, 2 names stick out in history: Emperor Caladan, 17th of his line, and Gimka the Archer. Ordinarily, a wizard of such magnitude as Shirikar would have impenetrable defenses, a guard never lowered, and a supernatural sense of their surroundings, as if being able to see everything at once. A true wizard has no blind spots. However, through clever strategy, a gap in Shirikar's armor was made. He stood high upon his tower, clad in black robes, pauldrons of human skulls upon his shoulders, and a crown of burning iron cast into his own. Looking down, even a wizard so wise as he was shocked at what he saw. The Emperor himself and 100 of his strongest soldiers, clad in armor of pure shining gold, charging straight up the tower, marching vertically up the smooth stone exterior. At this crucial moment of surprise, an ogreish archer named Gimka sat atop the Rimthan Mountains, miles away from the battlefield. He drew his mighty bow, carved from a dragon's rib and strung with a cord made of steel. It is said that none alive today, not even an ogre, could draw such a bow again. As Shirikar's guard fell, bracing himself to face the Emperor Caladan directly, an arrow as long and as thick as a fence post flew from behind, severing his head from his body. His torso fell limp, tipping over the edge of the tower and cascading towards the ground. As the Emperor reached the top, he saw naught but the Black Wizard's head, still upon the floor. The day had been won. But as the Emperor reached out to grab the head of his fallen foe, the lifeless head had opened his jaw, letting out a scream that shook the earth below. As his mighty bellow rang out across the land, the tower began to fold in on itself. Within moments, the tallest point in all of Centrum collapsed, not stopping at the ground, but falling through deep below. Where it stood is now a pit equally deep as the tower was tall. The remains of Emperor Caladan XVII and his men were never found, as nobody that entered the pit has ever come back. New life never grew at the scene of the battle, and a howling tempest prevents most people from ever getting near the area. The land was named the Lifeless Stretch, and nobody dares go near. As the life of Shirikar, the Black Dreamer, came to an end, after toppling nations and bringing with him the end of the Caladian royal bloodline, the Second Age was brought to a close. I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified of a new upload. I encourage you all to go to gloryboundstory.com. Those who sign up on the website will be the first to know about new projects and releases. In the coming weeks, I will be delivering a short story set within the Glorybound universe, exclusive only to those who sign up on gloryboundstory.com. You won't want to miss it, and I hope to see you all there.